Hello and welcome back, or welcome to the Awakening Philosophy podcast / read along / live stream, where we talk about philosophy, we try and understand philosophy, and we try ourselves to walk the path of true philosophy, what has been called the true spiritual path and the quest and destiny of man. That's what we're doing here. So it's sort of like a podcast where we talk about philosophy, but in order to talk about it as accurately as possible and also to learn as we go, we read a text. We read a text from which we can learn about philosophy, and specifically the logos. The logos is a key word. It's central to philosophy. It could be called the essence of philosophy. It's what distinguishes philosophy from all other spiritual traditions, in that it's a path through the self-logos. It's a rational understanding method. We develop our own thinking, our own understanding, but also that leads us to higher states of being. It frees us up to higher levels of power, and it allows us to function in our everyday world in a much greater way, in a way that is more likely to reach our goals and less likely to be limited by the blocks, particularly a certain kind of block that repeats in our lives that you may have noticed yourself, but all humans suffer from. Okay, that's what we're doing here. So this is the beginning of a new read-along. It's the read-along for Plato's Phaedo. It's the second in the series. We started on the Parmenides, where we went through the opening and the first hypothesis of the Parmenides. But then, so for those who are unfamiliar with the Parmenides, it's the start of Socrates' journey as a philosopher, the beginning. And we are taking a pause from that to jump to the end of his life, the end of his philosophical journey. So we can compare the start with the end and see how he's changed. What's Socrates' life been like as a philosopher? What does he think about his life? Because the Phaedo is a text written on his last day in the prison. See, we're in a prison right here if you're watching the video. It's a prison where Socrates was put in because he developed an understanding and relationship to the divine in a way that was not the official religion. He talked a lot about having a connection to his daemon and communicating with the divine in all of the ways that the divine can communicate with man and vice versa. So, he was put to death for that. And in his last day, we have the book, the Phaedo, where he talks with his friends, he reflects on his life, he talks about what the essence of philosophy is, he reflects on what his life has been like as a philosopher, but also he uses his philosophy. He uses his philosophy in a special way in the Phaedo that we can ourselves learn from and benefit from. So, we are going to learn what it means to be a philosopher, to live the life of a philosopher, what philosophy is, and maybe even benefit from the last conversation that Socrates had on this planet. How did he use his philosophy? Did he leave us something that we can benefit from? Did he give us something? Did he send us a gift? Did he leave us a message? And if so, how can we benefit from it? Exciting stuff. So this is a standalone series, so I'm hoping that even if you haven't gone through the first series on the Parmenides, you can pick it up from here. Maybe you've got an interest in the Phaedo. Maybe you've heard some interesting things about the Phaedo. Maybe you're just curious about Socrates' life and you want to join us in reading along that text with us. But as we did go through the first opening and first hypothesis of the Parmenides, we learned a lot. We leveled up as philosophical adventurers ourselves. And when we level up, we have this noise. That means you've leveled up. Okay, we saw a lot. And And then we've added it to our skill set, our inventory, our tool belt. We can function in a greater way, in a more philosophical way, having gone through the first part of the Parmenides. Now, because this is supposed to be standalone, I'm going to give a review, an overview, a synopsis of the key things that we learned that we're now taking with us that will allow us to benefit more greatly from reading the Phaedo. A way of reading it that will allow us to gain greater benefit. A way of allowing us to apply our understanding, our philosophical abilities to this text to see it in a deeper way. I'll give a summary. If you've gone through the first series on the Parmenides, the What is Philosophy and Reading Parmenides series, you may enjoy this recap as well. But even if you haven't, this will be something that you'll have to pick up and carry with you. And as we go, the key concepts will explain as we use them, so you should be able to start from here if you like. But there'll be a key language that we've developed that you can learn as you go, or you can go back to that series and read along with us. So just to summarize, the Parmenides itself is a text that has an opening where we have a fun introduction where Socrates meets his teacher Parmenides for the first time, a 19-year-old Socrates meeting his 60-year-old teacher, master of philosophy. He presents a question, he presents a philosophical question that brings him into philosophy, but of course he's stuck, he's just new. Parmenides is able to recognize that, address his problem, point out how the problem functions, point out the power of the problem, and point out the cause or the nature of the problem. In a conversation, in a use of his dialectic, the use of your understanding through philosophy, in a conversation with another person, in order to benefit them, is the dialectic. So we got to see that. And thankfully, it happened to Socrates and got him into it, because Socrates is a great philosopher that we are still benefiting from 2,000 years, more than 2,000 years after his death. Okay? And when Socrates was through this question and answer, two people, right? Dialectic means two. It's a back and forth. It's a two. Philosophy is a two-person game. So in this back and forth dialectic, Socrates was asked questions about some key terms in philosophy that he was able to reflect on how they were functioning in his own life to see a cause of his problem, a certain way of thinking. Okay? So, how it functions, its power, and its nature or cause. This is a triad. And we recognize there's a significance in looking for triad. Why? Because the dialectic is the use or the power of the logos. The logos is what we're looking to master. That's what philosophy is. So what is the logos is one of the questions we're carrying with us. So how do we do that? How do we be a philosophical adventurer? Well, we've recognized there are certain things that are involved with following the logos and discovering the logos and awakening the logos in our lives. One of them is recognizing key terms. Make a list of key terms. There are some key terms that have an existence in a different realm of being. In philosophy, we call the metaphysical realm, metaphysics, meaning before or prior to physics. Also called the realm of being. We call it the realm of being because it has it's a living, intelligent being. It exists, but it's outside of time and space, because time and space is the realm of becoming. Everything in our physical world is in a state of becoming. Everything is growing or dying, everything you've ever seen. However, there are some things you don't see with your physical senses, but can understand, that don't exist in that state of flux, the state of change, the state of becoming. Certain principles certain forces. Now, those principles and forces have their own prior existence in this realm of being. So Socrates' question coming in was, hey, I hear that there is an existence of likeness. In our physical world, there is like things. You're like me and he's like him. And there's unlikeness. I'm like you in that we're philosophers. I'm unlike you in that I'm a different person. So there must be some pure idea of likeness and unlikeness. And same for one and many. I'm one person, but I have many parts. I've got two hands. That's a many. But that's not interesting in the world of becoming. I want to know how we can have these existing ideas in the realm of being. How can there be a unified oneness in the realm of being, but there still be ideas like one and many that are opposites? That doesn't make sense. Because you'll be saying that likeness is like unlikeness, but they're opposites. So how can they be existing in the same realm of being? That was his confusion. Okay, and we looked at that and we got to see that for ourselves. Of course, he didn't have an understanding of the logos or the dialectic. So he didn't recognize he hadn't developed certain key words and understanding of key relationships that have a different kind of functioning in this higher realm of being. He was using our language of the physical world to understand a higher dimension. We talked about how that would be like using, like if you look in a mirror, you're in 3D, the mirror is in 2D, but the 2D mirror lacks fundamental things like intelligence and mind. And it's fundamentally opposite. You raise your left hand, the mirror image raises his right hand. Your mirror image lacks will. So if the mirror image wanted to understand us in a higher dimension, it needs a new language because it doesn't have intelligence or will or life or vitality in that mirror reflection. So too are we learning a language of the metaphysical realm, because as philosophers, we're interested in the truth. Not an example of truth in our physical world, like a true thing, a true theory, the truth about where my car is parked, the truth about how much I have to pay for dinner tonight. These are examples of things that can be true, but we're interested in truth itself, which gave us a key language, selfer terms. The things that exist in the realm of being that we're interested in understanding and knowing for ourselves, directly experiencing this realm of being, awakening us up to the truth. So in that sense, you could call it a mystic tradition or a spiritual tradition, in that it awakens the cognitive function that allows us to see into the spiritual realm or the non-physical realm, the realm of being. So this is what philosophy is. And Parmenides said, by the way, Socrates, this is what you have to do. There is an exercise called the dialectic that is a way of using the logos, using these key terms, and applying everything you've learned about it so far to understand the higher realm, the realm of being. That's what my student Zeno has been doing, and you need to exercise yourself in. Of course, there are problems getting into that are human and normal. Zeno points this one out. The many are ignorant that without this discursive procession through the beings, dialectic, it happens to be impossible for our intellect to hold on to the truth. Now, the truth is, according to Socrates, he wants to solve the following puzzle about the ousia self that is woven together into the idea selves and demonstrate in detail about the ideas which we grasp by the activity of the logos. Now, that sounds a bit complicated, but let's break that down because it's a great summary of what we've learned so far. that ability to see that higher realm is ousia. It's our sixth sense. To see from our mirror realm into the real realm. From the realm of becoming to the realm of being. Now, the things that we see are themselves ousia. That's their nature. It's the essence of mind. They are mind itself. And so we can call them selves when we're talking about the beings that exist in that realm, because for the Greek language, selves refer to the honorific, the highest example. And they're also called the ideias. In the Greek, ideia means to behold. So therefore, if we can behold them or grasp them with our mind, with our intellect, and know them, that's something called knowledge. Directly apprehend them. Which makes it different from a scientific theory that you can never know for certain. You never know a scientific theory for certain because you can't experience it directly non-physically. You infer the principle. You imagine, you theorize about this principle, but you never directly experience it. It's not spiritual. So, because we can behold them, we call them the ideias. This is important because one of the greatest betrayals to our humankind is mistranslating the idea as concept. It's not idea in the English. It sounds like it, spelt a little bit differently. In fact, that was Socrates' problem coming in. He thought of these things as concepts. Maybe they just exist within us, within our soul as a concept. They don't have their own eternal existence. So, having recognized Socrates' personal problem, that's very cultural. We ourselves can identify with that, or even if we don't think that way, we can probably recognize people who think that way, that all ideas are just concepts, just parts of language, everything is subjective. There's no objective, real existence of such things like beauty itself and goodness itself. They're not objective truths that are universal and able to be apprehended by anyone with mind and the ability to use the logos to reflect on themselves. We don't think that way, so we call philosophy empty talk if we think that way. And this is something that Parmenides helped us to recognize. To collect thyself together by exercising more in that way that appears useless to the many, to the multitude, and is called by them empty talk. For if you do not, while you are still young, the truth will utterly elude thee. This was his instructions to Socrates and to us, because we are on that journey ourselves. We have to somehow collect ourselves together. Thyself, for the Greek, their maxim was to know thyself, to collect the highest part of ourselves together, somehow. And the way of doing that is through the logos and the dialectic, which the many call empty talk. And we also saw that he said, by the way, the reason why it can be difficult is the greatest puzzle that humankind has. This one. The following is the greatest puzzle, even if following the proof through many elaborate details from one practiced and experienced and with natural talent, even then, a dialectician, even then, he who contends that the idea selves are unknowable may still remain unpersuaded. Which means we have to keep an open mind to the existence of being and not remain stuck to our ignorance, that the physical world is all that there exists. There is no such thing as soul, as spirit, as mind. These are just physical things, just electrons in the brain and nothing more. When you die, that's it, you're worm food. That is the opinions of human beings in our culture, or maybe in your religion. But we have to And so Parmenides says, Socrates, you need to exercise yourself in the logos and the dialectic. That's the only way where you can know the truth about the beings. You have to permit the ideas of the real beings to be. You have to keep your mind fixed on these objections, the counterattacks, the things that tell you you can't do it. You have to define each one of the particular ideas. You need to, that's how you turn your understanding, dianoia in Greek, and you have to allow that each one of those real beings is always of the self. This is the power of the dialectic. You have to permit the ideas of the beings to exist to begin philosophy, if you want to know the truth, and you're not just interested in opinions that are changing. Opinions derived from your physical experiences. If that's not enough and you want truth, you can be a philosopher. You have to allow for those ideas to be. You have to keep your mind fixed on the objections that come up that can distract you from being a philosopher. There are many characters in Plato's text that get distracted. They give up on their quest. Cephalus is the guy narrating the whole text of the Parmenides. We see him come back in the Republic. So maybe he got distracted. Permit the ideas of real beings to be, number one. Keep your mind fixed on the objections, number two. Define each one of the real beings. He said that's Zeno's dialectic. Do a dialectic on the real beings. Understand them. Now, a dialectic can be used with another person, like Parmenides is with Socrates, or you can use it yourself to understand an idea. We talked about how there are 4 categories. You define the thing, you give a demonstration of it. You talk about how that thing affects others. You talk about how those others, having been affected, relate to others. And then finally, how those affected others relate back to its subject. That's really quick, but you can go back into the previous series and look up our work on the dialectic to see that there are 4 categories in the dialectic. And there are 2 halves. If the idea exists, if justice itself as a being exists, what can you say about it? What can you say about its functioning? What can you say about those affected by it? And what can you say about those affected by it having been affected relating back to justice itself? So those 4 things: definition, demonstration, division, and synthesis analysis. And equally so, what would follow if it didn't exist? So this is a recap of what we've got so far in our bout. But if you're starting on this series from here, you should be able to pick it up as we go as well, I hope. Okay. So he concluded by saying, and so when outlining that dialectic as the exercise we must do, he also mentions it falls to the ability of an individual with very good natural disposition, you and me watching this video, to be able to learn that there is a certain kind of each idea, and that of self-ousia, pure mind that can experience itself, turn around, according to self. It has its own self-existence in the realm of being. They will deserve even greater admiration who, having made this discovery, shall be able to teach yet another person how to thoroughly well distinguish these particulars in a sufficient, efficient way. So, he's saying, hey, when you get there, when you master the dialectic and you can master the logos and you can use it through the dialectic to yourself rise up and know the realm of being. By the way, there's another level. You have to recognize that all of those beings that you are experiencing now directly and understanding through the logos are all of the self. So there's another level above being, prior to being, called the one self. So there's 2 kinds of dialectic. The dialectic that uses these terms from Zeno's dialectic to apply it to the cause of even those things is Parmenides' dialectic. So there's 3 levels of reality: the lesser, our physical world; the greater, the realm of being, and the ultimate, the one self, which is itself a triad. Interesting. Now we are learning that we have to look for triads, look for sets of 4, look for sets of 2s, look for sets of 1s, and add them to a skill tree. Why? Because the Logos has patterns. If you recognize, oh, there's a triad over there, but I've also recognized another triad over here, like being, power, and activity as a triad, I can use one triad to understand another and vice versa. That will unlock greater seeing and understanding of the Logos and of reality and of the self. Why? Because that's the Logos, an understandable and knowable, spiritually experienceable pattern that unfolds all of reality, so it emanates from the cause, the self, but also is our journey back to the cause. So here's another famous triad from philosophy, from Platonic philosophy, from Plato and Proclus, yes, who was a teacher of Plato's school after Plato. Everything that exists, everything that is from self, in self, and returns to self. Okay? The cause of self emanates from self for creation and returns to self. That returning to self, or in the Greek, there's the expression know thyself, is the destiny of man, therefore. The destiny of all of us. It's the final boss we want to slay. Okay, so, and we get there through figuring out the Logos and using it, because it's that dialectic that will allow us to make that journey. So that's where we are. So Socrates was sneaky.
Sneaky little hobbit thief.
So when this was all outlined to him as a young philosopher, he said, I don't quite understand. Can you give me an example, Parmenides? Can you give me an example of the dialectic? And by the way, make the subject not being itself, or truth itself, or knowledge itself, or justice itself, all of those things that have their own knowable existence in the realm of being that we can apprehend directly through the Logos. No, I don't want to know about that. Go to the ultimate. Give me an example of the dialectic using the self. Parmenides laughed and said, that's crazy, you're crazy, that's too much work. I don't want to do that. But Zeno, his student, said, please, I would like to hear it as well. I haven't heard it for a very long time. So he gave us the first hypothesis. So he began in this way. Parmenides says, we play a reality-based game, philosophy, the noblest game. I must begin from myself and the hypothesis of myself by hypothesizing about the one self, and also whether one is or whether one is not, and what must the result be. Giving us a set of 9 hypotheses. His first one, his hypothesis of the self, the one self, and then 4 hypotheses of if the one exists. If you think the one of the one self, the ultimate self, exists, which means puts it in that realm of being, not the ultimate realm, not the top one, the greater realm. There are 4 hypotheses, 4 ways of talking or understanding and experiencing the self in that realm. And if one does not exist, if you don't think there's a realm of being, you're an empiricist or a physicalist or a relativist. There are many ists that reject the existence of the higher realm, even though it's the essence of philosophy, even though many people have experienced it, many different spiritual traditions, many different near-death experiences, drug experiences, dream experiences, flow states. People who do sport sometimes talk about separating their soul from the body and functioning in the greatest way that they've ever played. There are many examples of separating from the body and also experiencing the brilliant light of being, and many traditions are built around that. But because of their upbringing, their social and religious upbringing, they might be blind to those experiences. Even if they've had them themselves, they might discard it as evil or illusion, Maya, right? And they might be against the reasoning, the dialectic, and the logos that can bring you to it. So it will really limit their personal development. So 1 hypothesis of the self, 4 hypotheses of what follows if you think that there isn't the ultimate, but there's the self that exists, there is a divine realm, and 4 if you don't think that, it's just a physical. So we can recognize if one is and if one is not, fits the structure of the dialectic. Any idea, you talk about if it does exist, if there is an existence of beauty, there are 4 categories: definition, demonstration, division, analysis. But if you think that justice doesn't exist, it's just a concept or an agreed upon word or something like that, there are 4 ways of talking about it in that way. So he's not applying this 4 is and 4 is not to justice. He's applying it to 1, which elevates it to the higher level. But all of these are not the truth. All of these are different stages leading up to the truth of the one self, of his hypothesis. Okay, so we can use the dialectic to help people, like Parmenides with Socrates, like a Gandalf figure.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
Who comes back and helps those young hobbits starting off on their journey. We can use it for ourselves to make that journey ourselves, because we have to first reach our own enlightenment, our own personal excellence, reach our own destiny before we can adequately help other people. And we can also use it as a structure to understand anything in this reality that follows an ordered hierarchical system that has key terms that can be arranged in an order, that can be hierarchically arranged, that can be understood. Such as, for example, music follows those patterns, geometry, the movement of the planets. Right? But particularly for us as philosophers, states of being or states of the soul. Because humans go through hierarchical development. We recognize that, you might start off with false beliefs, prejudices. Then you learn more and you realize, oh no, the world isn't that way. And you can be in a better way, being. You can have more power to reach your goals when you're free from those false prejudices that limit you. Power. And you can function in a greater way. Activity. You might start off thinking, oh, there's nothing, nihilism, the belief that there's nothing that's real, everything is illusion, nothing is meaningful at all. So that can make you really sad. And of course, if you think there's no meaning, then there's no meaning in the logos. There's no point in developing yourself through the logos. That's a very low stage. But greater than that is, well, okay, there is a language, but it's all relative. It's all just relative to our own. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But there is something that we're talking about because we can at least talk. Relativism, that's step up. Right? And then you might think, well, there is something that exists. Like we can't all talk about beauty without there being some pure idea of beauty that somehow every particular participates in. So there is something divine. There is something of the realm of being, but it doesn't care about us. We have no way of connecting. We're isolated from it. Okay, that's higher. That has that first step required for the dialectic, that the beings exist. But it's unknowable. In fact, this is what Parmenides calls the greatest problem. The following is the greatest puzzle, that even if following the proof through many elaborate details from one practiced and experienced in the dialectic, with natural talent in that, even then he who contends the ideas selves are unknowable, They still exist. We just can't know them. You may still remain unpersuaded. You might not be able to directly experience it. You'll be limited. So, now that we can see that there are different stages or levels of thinking, of acting, and of experiencing, we can see that there's a hierarchical structure to the development of the soul. So we can apply the logos and the dialectic to understanding the soul. Why is that important? Well, that's that first use of the dialectic. In order for Parmenides to help Socrates and help all of us, because Socrates' work is helping us even to this day, he had to recognize the level that Socrates was on. Oh, this is how you think about the realm of the beings. This is why you're stuck. And this is what you have to do to learn, what you have to learn how to do to get out of where you're stuck. Okay, that use of the dialectic. Now, we are jumping into the Phaedo to see if it's stuck. Different word. If the teaching stuck, if it worked. Was Socrates able to get out of his problem and develop as a person, as a soul? And if he's talking with his friends on his last day, can we see in the Phaedo him functioning like Parmenides? Is he able to use a dialectic in that way to recognize the level of thinking of his friends and somehow participate or share in a dialectic with them to help them recognize the nature, the essence, the power, and the functioning of their problem? And if our problems are taught to us from a young age, from our society and our religions, maybe we have ones that are just the same as the characters in the Phaedo. So we can go through the argument as though he's talking to us. So Socrates maybe has left a dialectic between him and you, him and me, him and all of us, even in this time. So we can benefit from, what were the three things we needed in the dialectic? Keep in mind the counterattacks. Do a dialectic or understand the selves and being, and then also understand that they are of the self. So the counterattacks can get in the way. But we can use the dialectic and the logos not only in our journey out of our ignorance, up the levels of development to experience the realm of being, and then go beyond it to the self to reach our ultimate cause, but we can also use it to solve our problems. In fact, if it's true that the logos is the intelligent, intelligible paradigm or model for all order in reality, then it would follow that it's the only real way of solving those kinds of problems. What kind? Not a one-off problem like, oh, I got a flat tire, I've got to fix that problem. But a certain problem that repeats itself in all areas of your life, causing a certain kind of failure over and over, and no matter what you do, you can't seem to get out of it. Usually when you participate in something good or you're reaching a state of excellence, these sort of problems come up to limit you, to prevent your development up that ladder. Those kinds of problems we call the pathologos, these sick logos. Now, if even the pathologos follows the structure of the logos, only it has false ideas in the place of the true ones, then the way of solving problems, human problems, is the application of the dialectic to our problems. So we have an interesting duad. We've been looking for pairs. One part of the equation is the use of the logos, through the dialectic, applied to the higher, our personal development, which takes us towards our destiny. The communication from our goal to us to guide us there is called providence. And that also communicates through the positive logos. And maybe Parmenides and Socrates, maybe in the Phaedo, we will see being like providence, in that he might be communicating a dialectic and logos to us that might help us in that journey. So the other side, that's the positive, is the negative. Now that's not evil. It's not sinful or bad. It's the negative, distorted reflection in a lower dimension. Just like you can't look at your reflection in the mirror and say, oh, that's bad because it doesn't have life, doesn't have intelligence. When I raise my right hand, it gives me the left hand, so it's wrong. You wouldn't say your reflection is evil. That's one way of thinking about the world, but that's a lower level on the hypotheses of the 9 hypotheses of Parmenides. So it's not evil. What would you say it is? It's a negative reflection. But it causes our problems. So the positive use of the logos through the dialectic allows us to reach our destiny, our highest goals, our most meaningful spiritual goals. Equally so, the communication of that logos to help us is providence. On this side, the communication of the pathologos or anti-logos limits you from that, keeps you down, keeps you thinking you're no good, not powerful. You can't function towards your highest goals. Okay, the negative nature, your nature is bad. Negative power, you are ineffective and unpowerful. And negative activity, you can't do anything. Right? Feelings of inadequacy about the self. But we can apply the logos and the dialectic to understand that. That's called philosophical midwifery, or the way of understanding and solving human problems. So, why are we talking about that? Well, we've learnt this from the beginning of the Parmenides, but after going through the opening and the first hypothesis of the Parmenides, we're stopping. Because the first hypothesis is the ultimate, the one self. And we could see that as a demonstration of the logos and of the dialectic, and helped us. But then when we jumped into the second, it was a bit more complicated. Why? We're going from the ultimate to the realm of being, and that is metaphysics. The opening of the second hypothesis. Okay, if there is an existing realm of being, if the one exists or participates of ousia, there must be one participating in ousia. There must be something that exists. So the thing and existing are 2 different things, so you have to have difference, that's 3. So just for there to be something that exists, you automatically need 3 things. The one existing, because anything that's a thing is a one, some kind of a one. One stuffy, one harp, one coffee mug, one sip of coffee. Anything is a one. Even if you have 3 pens, one group of pens that we call 3. Each part is a one. So everything is a one, and if it exists, then it has to have a quality, so one and exist. That has to be different. That's 2 things. And the third thing has to be different, and then you can take those ideas and match them up. It got a bit complicated, is what I'm saying. So, how do we stick with it? It's like we've defeated the level 1, the first hypothesis, but the enemies that we're slaying in the second level are too high for us. So we need to go on a side quest, on a different adventure to level up so that we can become leveled up and better in some kind of way that will allow us to approach the second hypothesis. So that's why we left the Parmenides where we did. We're going to go back to the second hypothesis, but first we're going to learn some key things from the Phaedo. What key things? Well, first of all, what does it mean to level up? What is the soul that is leveling up? And the first thing, the positive logos. How can we be in a state of being that allows us to follow the logos to our destiny? How can we clear up or remove any of the false beliefs or pathologos or societal ignorances that will make it difficult? And also a third thing, something that's in between what's true and what's false. A combination of true and false we call mythology. Mythology is false because it's made up characters, but they are true in that they are representing true principles of the logos. A logos that can be applied to either. It's the universal. It's the principles of the logos and the dialectic, and by turning them into a mythology or a story or a narrative, it helps you to remember them easily. What's curious in the Phaedo is that mythology can actually be part of the cause of your problems. If you were taught a mythology from your family, from your culture, from your society, from your religion, that says, oh, by the way, humans are bad, or the gods are evil, or the gods hate humans. This is a mythology that a lot of people grow up with that will lead to a fundamental false belief about reality, about themselves, about their ability to do philosophy and level up. So every time they get into a high idea, or if they try and get into the second hypothesis, it'll get too complicated and they'll give up. I can't do this. I'm not good enough. It's not worth it. It's empty talk. All of the kinds of objections that Parmenides says you need to watch out for. And if you don't address them sufficiently, you are going to remain unpersuaded. You're not going to be able to climb your ladder to your highest, most meaningful goals. So the mythology can be the cause of what's bad and the cause of what's good. In the Phaedo, we might see both. We're keeping an open mind to, can we discover a mythology that maybe Socrates is leaving for us to represent the higher? And maybe he's going to spend his last day helping his friends address his negative mythology. The negative mythology. And that might be a negative mythology that's very common in our world. We might be able to relate to it, and therefore we might be able to benefit and level up from taking part in this conversation as though we are engaged in that conversation ourselves. That's what we're keeping in mind. Now, as we go through, we've got to keep in mind what it means to be a philosophical adventurer, and we have to keep in mind why we're doing this. So that's the introduction, and let's write this down so we know where we're going, to have it nailed down. So we have a text here, this one here. There we go. These are our notes from the end of the Parmenides series. Now, we talked about this here. Oh, by the way, mythology, we talked one kind of mythology that's pretty cool is this one. This one here. There's a mythology in our culture called Zelda. Whoops. Jarvis, are you there?
Allow me to introduce myself. I am Jarvis.
Jarvis is my AI that helps me with my scenes sometimes. Can you help me out, please?
I'm here to assist you with a variety of tasks as best I can.
Okay. Whoop, not that one. There we go. That's what I want. Thank you, Jarvis.
Systems are now fully operational.
This is a picture of probably the third most popular Nintendo franchise. So, mythology for the Greeks were to do with stories about heroes and the gods. So it's important to recognize that anyone could make a story about Zeus, but not everybody knows the true nature of the logos and the reality. So, when you're learning about the stories of Greek mythology, make sure you have a compilation of a particular author. Because Plato's use of mythology, we will come to see in the Phaedo, is not the same as everybody's. So if you want to study Zeus, don't get a collection of stories, because that's a collection of everybody's different opinions and ignorance. But if you wanted to use mythology in the true sense, it'd be the way Plato uses it, as a personification or a characterization to help remember the principles of the logos and the dialectic. Now, our modern mythology is superheroes and other characters in gaming or movies that follow the hero's journey. Luke Skywalker, Harry Potter, Frodo, and this guy is named Link from the Legend of Zelda video game series. If you're not familiar with video games, You might be familiar with Pikachu, the Pokemon. That's, I think, the most popular, a most well-known Nintendo franchise. You might be familiar with Mario from Mario Brothers. That's probably a close second to Pikachu. And this guy is probably number 3 on the list. Link from the Legend of Zelda. There he is playing his little instrument thing. I forget what it's called. So, why am I talking about this? Well, this is a handy mythology that we can take and use for ourselves. It's one that already exists in culture, but might need to be tweaked. How do we tweak it? We add the logos to it. So we take a common mythology that we're all familiar with, and we improve it by adding the logos to it. What am I talking about specifically? Well, one of the key goals in The Legend of Zelda is to master the Triforce. This image here, the Triforce. What we can recognize in philosophy as a triad. Now, in the Triforce, it's power at the top, wisdom on the side or second, and I think courage is third. We can recognize that these are actually terms that are used in philosophy, but they're not in the right order, and power is in a different triad to wisdom and courage. So it's a bit of a mix. So we can improve it and make it our own. So here's the triad again, the Triforce. Okay, so what we're going to do is use it to recognize what's true, make our own Triforce. So this is the Zelda triad. Power, wisdom, and courage. But plugging in my keyboard. We recognize that there is a certain triad we've been using in this introduction, being, power, and activity. This is a key triad in the logos. If you want to talk about something, you can talk about its nature. Hey, the realm of being, what's its nature? Ousia, right? Pure mind. Which means that we can participate in it as well because we're of mind. Okay. So what's the nature of being? Ousia. What's its power? Hey, if there was an intelligent reality, we wouldn't say that the divine or the realm of being is powerless, is lifeless, has no will and energy. It's not a dead thing. So it has some kind of power. And finally, how does it function? Hey, we wouldn't say if there was a divine, it's ineffective. If there was an ultimate self, it has no activity. Parmenides doesn't just sit in silence when Socrates comes to talk to him. And we're going to learn how Socrates has his own functioning or activity. So this is a triad we have in our back pocket. So as a philosophical adventurer, there are certain things we have to do. Okay? This is, of course, the structure of the dialectic. In a nutshell, the 4 categories. When you talk about anything, you can talk about its the thing itself. If beauty exists, what can you say about it? How can you say beauty relates to something else? Like, how does beauty relate to us? Maybe it gives the cause of beautiful things. So that's what you can say about what it is, how it functions. And then finally, how do we relate to each other? If beauty exists, maybe we try and be more beautiful ourselves. Maybe we pursue beautiful things. And finally, if beauty exists and we're affected by it, how do we then relate back to the source? The self and other. So dialectic means 2. So we can understand that as a conversation between 2 people, like Parmenides and Socrates, or Socrates and his friends in this Phaedo. Or you can recognize it as 2 ideas. self and other. What can you talk about the self itself? How can you talk about the self relating to some other? And you can pick whatever other you like. So maybe you want to understand infinity. If infinity has a pure being, what can I say about it? If infinity exists, that's category 1. Category 2, if it exists, how does it relate to something? So what's a good idea that helps you understand infinity? I know time. How does it relate to time? So now you've got your duad of the dialectic, infinity and time. So, or self and other. So what can you say about infinity itself? How does it relate to time? How does time relate to itself or the other others, the other ideas? And then how do those others then relate back to time if time exists? So this is the 4. Again, that's a quick overview. You might want to go back and look at the dialectic talks from our What is Philosophy and Reading Parmenides read along, or you can just pick it up as you go. Well, we're going to learn more about this. The more we use it, the more we read, the more we do philosophy, the more familiar it's going to be. Okay, so that's a dialectic. But also we need to understand what it means to be a philosopher. Now, we went through that in detail with our other text, but to give a overview, we need to create a character, our own philosophical adventurer. Whoops, it's got to have arms. This is what this drawing is here. Get my lightning bolt on his robe. This is us. This is the philosophical adventurer. Philosophical adventurer. Now, I talked about in our physical world of becoming, there are examples of beautiful things, but to be a philosopher is to ask the question, well, hang on a second, if there are examples, what are they examples of? What is the excellence or the ultimate of beautiful things? That could be a way into philosophy. Another way into philosophy could be saying, well, hang on a second, I really see the value in thinking. I know dumb people who don't think through problems and they have and they suffer because of it. I recognize there are people maybe in my own family or my own culture who have religious ideas that are irrational by nature. And I can see how that can cause harm. People blindly obeying others instead of understanding for themselves. If that's the case, I can see the value in logos or reasoning, but what's the excellence? What's the ideal? That's a question about the logos. So, what's the ideal or excellence of beauty? What's the ideal or excellence of reasoning? Everything that, by the way, even in beauty, there's someone experiencing it. Even in thinking, there's someone thinking it. So what's the one thing that's doing it? What's the self? Not just my ego or my CV, but what is the ultimate or excellence of self? These kind of questions about excellence are the ones that can draw you into philosophy. So we see excellence, seeking excellence is primary for a philosopher. Gets you into the game. You're not content with giving up halfway. You want to go the whole way and reach your destiny. Also, we saw that there are certain things you need to develop and take with you. We have to keep with us an inventory. In that inventory is key terms. We're looking for key terms. What key terms are in the logos? What are terms that Socrates uses a lot, that are used in philosophy? Terms that are primary. or have a selfer existence. By the way, if they have an existence in the self way, in the higher way, we call them selfer terms. Selfer terms. So we can say there's self-beauty. We also have in our sack, we look for key terms. We look for order, patterns. And we develop questions. What is the excellence of reasoning? What is the excellence of beauty? What is the self itself? And everything we learn, we have to reflect, use it to understand ourselves. That's called ousia. Reflecting upon yourself. We have to be doing that. And also we have to be developing our skill trees. What are skill trees? Well, because the Logos doesn't just have key terms, but it's also relationships, those relationships can be in sets of ones. The one self could be in sets of twos, pairs. Look for pairs. Maybe they are triads. Look for triads. Yeah. Triad's a big one. Also sets of fours and so on. Put them into patterns. That's how we go through it, okay? As we go through, we're going to be looking for that. Now, one triad skill tree, we're using Zelda. We're using this guy. The Triforce. It is a kind of triad used in mythology, but we are going to add the Logos to this guy and make it a true triad. True mythology, one that reflects the truth about the Logos, which we can then use to reach our higher goals. So, we recognize there is one in philosophy that's key, being, power, and activity. But here is a list of other triads that we have discovered along the way. We have, here's our activity, power, and being. But we also recognize that we are seeking the Logos. But there's also the anti-Logos or pathologos. This causes our problems. The counterattacks and objections that we have to be aware of, according to Parmenides. This is our journey to our highest goals. This is the paradigm, the ladder we climb to become a philosopher.
You're a wizard, Harry.
Right? And the dialectic can be equally applied to both. The name given, if the Logos only exists if philosophy exists. This is what's true about it. So what's the triad if philosophy exists? If philosophy doesn't exist, but in between the both is mythology. Philosophy is what is the practice of using the Logos to our higher goals. Modern philosophy, or misunderstandings of the word philosophy to mean my opinion, or my prejudice. Oh, it's my philosophy that all Mexicans are this, or it's my philosophy that women should be that. Right? This isn't true philosophy. That's your opinion. Okay? Those opinions power your anti-Logos, which causes your problems. But the dialectic can be represented with mythology. So we have 3 categories of triads. These are 3 different sets. But they're all triads. So this is a triad on the skill tree, this is a triad on a skill tree, this is a triad, and so on. So one of the triads is, in the dialectic, you can say something that's if your dialectic is on beauty, if beauty exists, what can you say about it? Now you can say three things about it. You can say what's true about it, what's false about it, and what's both true and false. You can't say anything else, just by definition. The triad. Philosophy and logos is what's true about something. What's false is what philosophy isn't, or our anti-logos. What's both true and false is mythology used in the right way. That's what we're doing. We're seeing how in the Phaedo, philosophy can be misused to cause problems, suffering, limitations from your philosophical quest, how we can develop a true mythology. And these are the things we're going to see in the Phaedo. We're looking for what? We're looking for, in the Phaedo, this is a question we're bringing. So question, zoom in a little bit. Question, this goes into our question sack. You have to bring a question with you. Why? To have a question is to be on a quest. Questions about Phaedo. We are going to see what Socrates uses mythology for to remove anti-logos, to create or use mythology, and finally to use logos to achieve higher. Use logos to, what should we call it? Use logos to separate from physical or the realm of becoming to better do philosophy. So that would be the higher use of the logos. That's a triad. Now I can use this thing here to make it like that. Now, why are we doing that, and why are we taking a break from the Parmenides to jump into that? Well, if we can see this, we can level up. Why? The more we can remove our anti-logos, the less objections we will have. The less blocks will get in our way, so we can go back into the second hypothesis on the metaphysical realm of being and be able to focus better. We can do the activity better. Seeing Socrates use mythology and seeing Socrates himself as a mythological character, as a character in a narrative that represents that what we're doing is possible. This is a person who did it and is helping us even 2,000 years later. His work and his legacy has lasted over 2,000 years. That can inspire us, that can give us more energy or power or motivation to jump back into the second hypothesis and tackle the difficulties in there. Finally, the use of the logos to separate our soul from the body means we're separated from our physical senses that can distract us. If you're doing philosophy, you might have a sore shoulder, or you might get hungry, or there might be some desire. Oh, I'd rather eat some delicious cake, then continue to go into the second hypothesis to benefit my soul. But if we are able to do what is called yoga is essentially how to separate the soul from the body, then we can awaken something called ousia, which is the sense organ through which we can experience the metaphysical world, because it's not a physical sense. This is key. It's the whole point. We're awakening our ousia. It's a sense of the mind. And if we can separate our soul from our body, what are we going to do? We're not going to just go on a trip and explore the astral realm and be a philosophical tourist. No, we want to use that ability to separate our soul from our body to do philosophy better. To be able to focus more, to be able to think more, and maybe to be able to experience the realm of being more, separated from our physical senses. So using the mirror analogy, for a mirror image to understand the 3D world, it's going to be out of his wheelhouse. Because a mirror reflection doesn't have will or intelligence or mind or understanding. So how can it use its realm to understand us? Because we have problems, like we want to know, how can we use our will better? How can we have more power? How can we understand better and have better activity in the world? How can we awaken our essence of our intellect and be in a higher way? It won't understand these difficulties that we have, these excellences we seek in our human existence, because it doesn't have an experience of it, which is one of the difficulties that some people find getting into philosophy. Why am I studying the realm of being and the self when I haven't had many or any experiences of anything other than the physical world? Maybe in dreams, that's not physical, but yeah, I don't really care about dreams. I haven't had a spiritual experience, so what are these guys talking about? That can be a difficulty. But if the Phaedo has Socrates giving us a yoga or method to separate the soul, maybe we can have some experience of, or at least be closer to the experience of that by being separated from our senses, our physical senses, to awaken a higher sense, the spirit or the ousia or the soul. Okay? That's the significance of it. Now, that means we have to talk about what is the soul. Because if the Phaedo has this activity or yoga, all yogas essentially have this as their essence, whether they're explicit about it or not. There is some sort of, whether it's chanting or breath control or meditation or whatever your yoga is, it's the separation of the soul from the body. And what follows can change yoga to yoga. But in philosophy, after we separate it, what follows is we need to do the logos better. So, what is the soul? Well, of course, when you can separate from the physical body, you can know it directly and you'll have a better way of understanding the soul. But for our purposes, we need somewhere to start. If we understand the soul as a word that unifies all of our psychic functions, then that's a good one to start on. Now, all people, you recognize yourself, there is some psychic feeling that's inward desiring. You get hungry. You want to eat a sandwich. And there's something that motivates you to seek things for yourself. Inward desiring. There's also an outward desiring. After you've eaten a sandwich, you might want to do something with your time. Hey, something drew you to watch this lecture or participate in this podcast, share in this podcast. There's an outward moving thing. What do I want in the world? And for both of those things, there's something that makes plans. It's at the top. It rules both. This is why it's a triad. There's something at the top that plans or thinks how I'm going to get the sandwich, or what I'm going to do to, get to the football game or get to this philosophy podcast. So the union of those three basic fundamental psychic functions or aspects within ourselves, we can call the soul. Okay? That's something we can take with us as a hypothesis going in that in philosophy, it's not about belief, remember. So you want to keep an eye open to confirming that hypothesis for yourself or improving it with your own direct experience from your soul, of your soul, which we're hoping to gain from the Phaedo. And now, you might have recognized that I have been using the word participate. We're participating in the logos, we're participating in the Phaedo, we're participating in this podcast, but I keep changing it to sharing. We are sharing in the logos. Why? Because when we are sharing in it, we're not taking a part. This was Socrates' problem in the Parmenides. He was understanding the higher realms or the soul or the realm of being in terms of a physical metaphor. He was using the mirror language to understand the 3D world. Only the next step up. He was using 3D language to understand the 4D world, the world that's outside of space and time. So he was saying, how do we participate in beauty itself? How do we participate in justice itself? Well, there's only two ways that you can participate of anything. You either take the whole of it or you take a piece of it. Part or whole. Just like in the physical world, if there's a pizza, you can have a piece of pizza, a part, or you can take the whole. But if you take the whole, there's nothing for anyone else to have. So this was a problem that we saw in the Parmenides, but we recognize that this word participate implies taking a part, and that's not the right language. Why? Because we do not diminish the realm of being by participating in it. That would be terrible. Every beautiful person that comes along would be taking something away from beauty itself. So we have to, but this is a very physical way of understanding things, right? Capitalism, what are we doing? Fighting for the pieces. I want all the pieces of money. I want to be a dragon and hoard all the wealth for myself. That's the people that we celebrate in the capitalist and allow to exist in our capitalist culture. Multi-billionaires. Ridiculous amounts of wealth that they will never use because they want all the parts. They take the whole, leaving only a small part for the 99% to take to share in. That's terrible. But that's not the realm of being. The more people sharing the logos, the more there is to go around, kind of. It's like an overflowing. So we don't use the word participate, we use sharing. And also we recognize that there are certain language of our physical world that reflects that. The idea of selfish. If you try and meet your self goals, you are being bad. That's selfish. Don't. Why? Well, we're taught that from the human history of being slaves. Slave to a king, slave to a tyrant, slave to a priest, slave to whoever. There are domination authority structures in our human history that teach us that meeting your own self goal takes away a piece that can go to the king. And you have to sacrifice for king. Right? So we're told that self is bad. You need to be selfless. That's good. Which is opposite of philosophy. Why? Because there's another triad that we use in philosophy called the self-triad. Here it is. We got it on the board. Here we go. Self-triad. Look at the triangles. Lots of triangles. Okay, the self-triad is, what's our goal? What's the destiny of philosophy? The self. That which is even experiences the realm of being is the cause of even being. Hey, if there's a self-justice and a self-beauty, there must be something prior called self. That's the ultimate. What and how do we get there? Through the self-logos. The logos, the word that is used for logos in this way is the self-logos. It's the logos from the self and leads back to the self. That's what philosophy is. That is what makes it a complete spiritual or mystic tradition. Yogas or traditions that lack the logos have problems that result from not having the logos, which we can recognize as not being able to climb the ladder best and not being able to address your problems. So famously, priests and spiritual people and who have reached great levels of experience still have their problems. They haven't used the logos of the dialectic to address their problems. So their activity is limited. So we don't want to have that limitation. Of course, we want excellence. Excellence is primary for the philosophical journey. What gets us in? Seeking excellence. Which is why all of my drawings are excellent. See? You'd be mistaken if you think, is that a photorealistic picture of Gandalf?
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
No, this is actually hand-drawn. But that's the excellence of my art, you see. So the excellence of reasoning is philosophy, and the excellence of spirituality is this complete philosophical tradition, which has logos and the use of the dialectic for logos, the use of dialectic to remove pathologos or anti-logos, and a way of representing the principles that can be applied to either we call mythology. And we're using the mythology of the Triforce. But why? It's already existing in culture. We just need to add the logos to it to make it better. Okay, so the self-try is what we're following. We're using the self-logos to experience the mind in being. If being is ousia, or pure mind, then how do we experience it? We have to ourselves become pure mind. So removing all our false beliefs is part of it. Developing the logos is part of it, because logos is one of the aspects of the pure mind. So we are joining our mind with the mind. So people who experience it, they talk about, oh, it was me. I recognize myself. Because it's you. It's your intelligence. It's just the purest, highest form of your intelligence. So using the self-logos to know and experience and to join with or behold, the Greek word idea, self-mind. So, what's philosophy? Using the mind to know the mind. Having the question. To have a question is to be on a quest, right? Question. We need to put questions in our question set. What is the reach of the mind? I've got a mind. What is it? How far does it go? What's the highest? These sort of questions seeking excellence or the ultimate. Okay? So, we use the self-logos to know being, which is self-mind, and then, that's Zeno's dialectic, by the way, then we use Parmenides' dialectic to realize all of these things have to come from the self and be in the self and want to return to the self. That's the ultimate, the destiny of man. So, that's the self-triad, the ultimate triforce. This guy. We can also recognize all of the counterattacks that get in the way are all objections to one part of this triad. Hey, yourself is rubbish. You are dumb. You are stupid. You're no good. You can't know God. That's arrogant. That's hubris. Right? Yourself is no good by nature. Or your mind is no good. Hey, the realm of being doesn't exist. All these experiences of the spiritual dimension, that's just a hallucination. That's just hippies on drugs. There's no mind. Mind is just the brain. Chemicals firing off willy-nilly. Right? Or even if there is a being, you can't know it because you can't think properly. Even if there is that, even if that is the offspring or the emanation of the self, the experience, self-experiencing self, even if that's true, you can't get there. Why? Because you don't have the ability to get there. Your logos is bad. You can't think. You're inadequate. Your mind or your power, you don't have the power. Your power is inadequate, or your activity is inadequate. What's that? Your being, your power, your activity. That's our fundamental triad. What one? Being, power, and activity. Why is it fundamental? Because this triad can go into any other triad. That's our picture here. Our soul has inward desiring, has a nature, has a power, has a functioning. Your inward desires have some sort of nature to cause you to want to eat a sandwich. There's some power. Oh, I feel hungry. It has an effect on you. And then there's some activity to motivate you to get the sandwich. Outward desire, same thing. There is something causing you to move in the world, to want to live and function in the world. There's some power that you have, will. You need a will to move in the world. The greater the will, the more you can outwardly move towards your goals. And also there's an activity that you use to meet your goals. Same thing with planning. There's something in you that is the nature of reasoning. There's an intelligence within you that has a power to affect those things, and it functions in a certain way to plan for those things. So being, power, and activity is a triad that can be in all triads. So even our self a triad, we can say our logos, a triad here. Our logos has some sort of power, has some sort of nature. By the way, the top of that triad touches the bottom of the next one. So it's like this, allowing us to have a ladder. So we use the highest aspect of the logos, we can enter into the realm of being. Enter the highest aspect of being, we can enter into the share in, not take a part. Notice when you have that part, you're not taking a piece. It's not like this. You don't take a chunk out. You're not taking a piece of the pizza. All right. So this is a fundamental nature of, this is called the hyparxis, by the way, in philosophy. I'm sorry. I'm going a bit far ahead, but these are terms that might come up as we go on, might be helpful. Take them as questions. We haven't really seen hyparxis come up in the text yet. We might do, but I'm just using it as a word to point to how the top of the triad touches the bottom of the next triad. So it'd be more like this. So if that's the bottom is this corner, at the bottom, the top is sort of like that bottom corner here. Feel that better. It'd be like this. Something like that. The hyparxis is the top of the one level that can touch the higher. It's also called Penrose's principle if you're interested in that. So this is all a summary. What are we looking for? Triads. Also, look for fours. This is all of these triads we've been using to understand what it means to be a philosopher and to prep ourselves for our journey into our next dungeon, our next side quest. It's not really a side quest, but it's a like going into another instance, accepting that quest. Because the second hypothesis has 2 higher level goblins that we need to level up a little bit. Level up what? Level up our soul. This thing. So that we can do what? So we can have a greater activity, power, and being. Why? We are going to use the logos to separate, to learn how we can learn more about the process of separating the soul from the body, allowing us a greater way of being, so we can participate in this set of 3s. Have a greater sense of being, to do the logos better of philosophy, and to experience what's true. We are going to be also perfecting our activity in philosophy by removing our anti-logos or pathologos, which is what's false about the self. It's the anti-self triad. And also we are seeing a mythology that will help us remember the dialectic, which can be applied to both. It's our power. It's the power of the logos. And we actually have that as a quote from Parmenides. Bring it up. Power of the logos. Power of the logos. We have to permit the ideas of real beings to be, keep our mind fixed on those objections. That's what we're helping with in the Phaedo. Define each one of the particular ideas. That's part of the dialectic. That's our understanding. And allow each one of the real beings to be of the self. That's the ultimate. This is the power of the dialectics. So using the logos in that way To do what? To address remove our problems and apply it to doing philosophy better, is the power. Which is why when this quote goes off the screen, I can circle power here. Power, that's the power. Dialectic, power. And Socrates himself is a mythology. He's a character mythologizing or personifying philosophy for us. So that will give us more motivation, give us more power to do what we're doing, to know it's doable, to see it's worth doing, to see what it's like for a philosopher in his life. These are all the things we're going to take in with us into the Phaedo. So I'm going to take a quick break, top up my coffee. That's a 1. It's a 1 coffee. I'm going to make the best coffee because I seek excellence, which makes me a philosopher.
You're a wizard, Harry.
It's going to give me energy and power to do this. It will allow me to do philosophy, to be in a better state of being. And yeah. I'm trying to use coffee as a mythology for everything we've said. Maybe you can do a better job. In fact, that's part of it. If you're enjoying this, share your own mythology. Come up with your own characters, or use other characters we're familiar with, like Spider-Man or Link or Mario, to communicate your understanding of the logos where you're at. Why? Because it's a 2-person game. Philosophy is a 2-person game. You got to share it. At least 2 people, right? The more the better.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
That's dialectic. There's at least 2 people involved. In the Parmenides, there were I think 7 people there with Socrates. In fact, that's one of the things we look for. How many people are with Socrates? That might be part of it. But so share your understanding, share your insights, share your mythology. If you create something, if you make some art, share a link to it. We can all benefit from it. We can all reflect on it. Reflect on ourselves, see how the art in our creations and our mythology can be used to understand self-logos, the self, or mind. So share it. If you have any ideas on how to share it better, please share your comments in the chat, and because we are all sharing in the logos. It's all about sharing. So it's not selfish or selfless. We want to replace this language, this bad language, with self-full. Hey, meeting your self-goals, self-logos, to reach the self-mind and then to know the self is not only capable, it's your purpose. You're a wizard, Harry.
You're a wizard, Harry.
So instead of saying, oh, it's selfish to meet your self-goals, that's bullshit. That's slave language. That's oppression language. We need to exchange it for self-full. Why? Because when you're full, you overflow. You can share. I talk about someone asking me to help them move their couch. If I'm hungry and tired, I won't want to. It'll be a burden. But if I'm full, if my self needs are met, I would love to help my friends. In fact, feeling like I can help people is one of the greatest feelings I can have, so long as it's from a state of fullness, of being self-full. That's Parmenides returning to help Socrates. And we're going to see if Socrates is self-full at the end of his life, and if he can overflow and share in his fullness with others. Share. And this is what we have to be aware of. What is the logos? Question. What does it mean to share in it? And wonder about it. We are sharing in it right now. Whether we like it or not, every physical principle is sharing the logos. And the more we apply the hyparxis of ourself, our reasoning and thinking part, not our inner desires or outward desires, our reasoning part, the hyparxis, the more we can share in that higher level where the logos lives, in being. So we're sharing in it. And you might recognize certain symmetries play out in your life. The more you share in this, the more you share in the logos, the more you share in these readings, maybe the logos reaches out to benefit you through the logos, which we call providence. So we want to be sharing the logos, but wondering about that. That's why there are question marks. We take questions in our question sets. Why? It puts you in a state of being, called wonder. We want to be wondering as we go through. So, we are somehow sharing in the logos. That's our activity we're engaged in. And how do we do it? What gives us the power to do that? Ousia, our use of the mind through the logos to reflect on ourselves in the highest way. And what results? A state of being called wonder. This is key. Wonder. And this is another question. Is Socrates in the Phaedo going to be wondering? Are his friends wondering? Or are they certain? Are they stuck in their beliefs? We can recognize as the Dunning-Kruger effect. Sometimes the more powerful your ignorance or false beliefs are, the less wondering you are and the more certain you appear to be. And of course, Parmenides talked about the appearance of knowledge being one of the causes to the problems that we have that causes our anti-logos or pathologos. This one. One who hears these words that I'm saying about the dialectic in the logos and our destiny is puzzled and questions whether these selves do exist. Does beauty and justice and being exist? Does the soul exist out of the body? Or if they do exist, do they exist in the highest degree? Oh, a question of excellence. Good. So that it appears abundantly necessary that selves must be unknown by human nature. Uh-oh. If we can't know it, what good is it? And whoever speaks in that way may appear to be saying something important. Whoop. And may be thought of as being an extraordinary statement. They appear to be wise. They appear to be knowing. What's the cause of that appearance? Oh, they remain unable to be persuaded. They're certain about their ignorance. Oh, that really looks like an alpha male. Look how strong they are. They must be right. Especially when we're young. Our priests, our parents, our teachers, all the people that influence our cultural beliefs that limit us, it's a human problem, by the way. You can't be a human and not pick this up. It's part of our reason for being here. It's not just the logos. You can't just reach your destiny by mastering the logos. You also have to apply it to the pathologos. It's positive and negative. That's part of the human problem. Parmenides recognized it 2,500 years ago, so it's not personal. This is not a slight against your own appearance of certainty of your own parents, of your own pastor, of your own imam, of your own guru, of your own teacher, right? Of your own mythology, of how Captain America looked to you, to be really certain when he punched the dude in the nose. It's not a personal slight. It's part of being human. The appearance of certainty. And how do they give the appearance? Their state of being was unpersuaded. They're stubborn. And when we're young, especially, Socrates talks about it's when we're young that we develop these fundamental bad mythologies, cultural mythologies. Hey, Socrates was killed for not agreeing with the crazy cultural mythologies of his time. However, we don't believe in the Greek gods anymore, but we still can benefit from the true logos from Socrates. So, thankfully, Socrates didn't cave. But what's the opposite of being unpersuaded? Wonder. We need to bring this in with us. That's why we have questions. That's why we look for these. We look for key terms. We look for patterns and order. We look for questions. This is the nature of the philosopher. He's a wondering person. Think about all of the great old wise heroes in culture, in games. They're curious. They're open-minded. They want to know more. They're asking questions. Famously, some of them have a wide-brimmed hat so they can cover their eyes so they can't be disturbed, so they can study and wonder more and more and more. Okay? Questions. Using our highest key terms. Putting them in the greatest orders. What kind of orders? triads, 2s, 1s, 4s, and maybe mores, 5s and 6s, and so on. And using it to reflect on ourselves. So what's going to make us wondering? As we go through, we're somehow sharing in the logos. We're sharing in something providential and divine that exists beyond time. Take that state of being with you as this kind of a philosopher, and let's jump into the text.